Good morning, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us today in our webinar announcing Terraform 0.14. We are super excited for all the things that are going to be released and involved in this new version. And today we have some of the very best, I should say, of our Terraform team. We have our Technical Product Marketing Manager, Ruddy, and our Technical Product Manager, Petros, and they are going to lead us through some of the updates and some of the new workflows that are involved in Terraform 0.14. If you have any questions, we have a Q&A box going, so feel free to drop them in there as we go through this session, and we'll try to answer them to the best of our ability. And we'll also take some time at the end of this, at the end of the demo, I should say, just to go through some of the questions during this session as well. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Petros to begin. And again, thank you guys and have a wonderful session.
All right. Hello, everybody. As Kitty said, my name is Petros, and I am the product manager of Terraform Open Source. So we're really excited to be announcing Terraform 0.14. But before we get there, before we get to the moment you're all here for, I wanted to cover a few odds and ends in the lead up to that. One of the things we released as part of the post 0.13 product line were network mirrors. So if you've been paying attention to sort of the broader strokes of what we're working on as a larger Terraform team and ecosystem, is that Terraform 0.13 launched with the HashiCorp Terraform provider registry. And what this means is that as of today, there are almost 500 community providers that can be installed automatically with Terraform init. And so what that begins to mean for some of our community, practitioners, developers, engineers, is an increased reliance on the registry or registry-like behavior. Now, what we've done with Terraform 0.13.2 and later is introduce the concept of network mirrors, which allows you as a small team or an organization with particularly bespoke provider installation needs to create a simple static mirror for providers you use. So if you look, just looking at the screen here, we use the Terraform CLI configuration to configure where Terraform is going to look for its network mirror. And then the network mirror itself can be as simple as an S3 bucket or a simple static web service that offers up the files Terraform needs to act as a network mirror. To sort of help you build a network mirror, we've added a feature, Terraform Providers Mirror, which allows you to select the platform for the providers you'd like to mirror, as well as location on disk, and it will ostensibly set up all the files, the artifacts that Terraform needs in the location that you intend to use for the network mirror. And so we're really excited to kind of keep growing this additional feature set in and around the Terraform registry that help get providers into your hands more easily, especially when you have unique operating requirements. So just wanted to remind you that it's there, and I recommend looking at the documentation on it just to see how you can leverage it for your bespoke workflows. I think as we sort of tiptoe closer to Terraform 0.14, Terraform 0.14 is part of a set of releases that are going to come relatively quickly as we work our way towards Terraform 1.0. I get to finally say these things with an increasing level of confidence. And, part of our promises or future promises for Terraform 1.0 are about stability. And so one of the ways we're trying to sort of clarify what that means for you as a practitioner, or developer, or as a large organization is where you can expect changes to be made and where you can double down on Terraform, in particular in automation. And so one of the dividing lines that we're trying to kind of illustrate and talk about and communicate with our community is that the UI of Terraform, so the console and sort of its interactive use cases, are largely focused on human interaction. And so we'd like to reserve the ability to modify some of that to better meet the needs of our community, of our users, of our practitioners, where they arise. Conversely, I think it's really, really critical that when Terraform is running in automation, that it is as stable and predictable as possible. And so over the last couple of releases, major releases, you'll have seen an increasing number of interfaces exposed with -JSON. And it's there that we hope you, in your sort of CI automation and your scripting, will rely on Terraform to provide a more stable interface for the things you need to automate. Because for us, changing those interfaces has a much higher barrier to entry. And so we'll be a lot more careful and nuanced, both in terms of the communication and the changes we make for those places where you're relying on it. And then finally, one of the most exciting changes that launched alongside Terraform 0.14 was a change to our Terraform documentation. Again, 0.14 is about stability and sort of the long-term viability of Terraform. And so we decided, our education team at HashiCorp decided to split up the CLI and language docs so that it's clearer for you, when you're looking for something nuanced, something technical, you know where to go. I know personally, when I've looked through the documentation, I've often found it difficult to know exactly where what I'm looking for is. And I think that's because the CLI documentation was so intertwined with the language. And even in just the week that this has been available, I have found myself wondering, where something is, going to look where I think it might be, and it being there. So we are really excited for this small, simple change to really empower our community. I would remind those of you who are new to Terraform, however, who have not spent a lot of time in the ecosystem, to go take a look at HashiCorp's Learn Guides, and we'll provide a link for that later on in today's webinar, because those are the best way to get on to Terraform. But let's get to the main course. So Terraform 0.14 is what you're all here for. It's what I'm here for. And we're really, really excited with this release. The first major change to Terraform 0.14 is the new Concise diff. So we are really, really excited to give our community the ability to make better decisions about what Terraform is changing. And I think that's an important nuance here, is that the Concise diff is about the changes Terraform is going to make to existing infrastructure, helping you make better decisions. And sometimes that's not just better decisions about what Terraform's going to do, but in a pinch, if you're running Terraform in automation, for example, more quickly being able to identify what Terraform has done. Commitment to making Terraform more predictable, more understandable, more clear as we get to Terraform 1.0. In 0.14, the Concise diff is actually being shipped as an opt-out experiment. So if you don't like it, you can turn it off. We would like to make it the default, and we are hoping that over the course of this release, we'll get enough feedback to confirm that the decisions we made here are the best for the bulk of our practitioners. Again, kind of doubling down on that idea of automation, if you rely on Terraform's plan output for your automation, you can still avail yourself of the entire JSON plan. And so you can check out the documentation on how to use that if you are not doing it today. The other big change, and this is the first of many changes in this area, are with sensitive values, and in particular, sensitive input variables. It's really important for me to share. And so if you've seen Kyle and I talk about this in other venues, or you were at HashiConf Digital, it's important for me to share with you that sensitive input variables are not about organizations protecting variables or the values of those variables from operators or Terraform practitioners. They're really about empowering practitioners to prevent the egress of those variables outside of systems that fall under the controls you have in place for Terraform. So let me give you a concrete example. Let's say you egress Terraform's console output into some kind of logging system or VCS, so a version control system after the runs. This feature will help you redact those variable values from your Terraform plan. It's not entirely foolproof, and the goal here is really, again, giving Terraform under the hood the ability to weave sensitivity through the plan and helping you make decisions about what you're going to do with specific values. It's also important to highlight now, before we even get to the Q&A, that we are not yet redacting variables from or the values from state. State is still the most sensitive aspect in the Terraform world, and we expect it to be protected. So state show will still reveal those values to you. They just won't be spit out automatically by Terraform. There's an additional layer to this feature that we're shipping in 0.14 as an opt-in experiment. And I think this is another trend you're going to start to see as we mature Terraform, that we're going to start engaging in more dynamic experiments in Terraform for interactive feedback. But basically, today, if you were to use a resource like the one on screen here, an AWS DB instance, and you put in a value for the password attribute or argument, Terraform will redact that in the plan today, but it will only redact it in the place where it first appears. Starting with 0.14, we are bringing the optional input variable sensitivity behavior to the provider's marked sensitivity. And we're hoping that over the next release, we can kind of get providers, provider developers, module developers to double down on a behavior where stuff is sensitive or sanely sensitive on by default. And that will help more of our community protect these variables from their kind of random egress out into the ether. It will require some work, and there's another caveat here. If you want to try this experiment, and we hope you do, if you want to try this, that it is per module. And so it's not going to be used in production anytime soon, I mean, in the 0.14 lifecycle, but we are hoping to turn it on by default in the next version of Terraform. The other major feature coming to Terraform 0.14 is the provider dependency lock file. And what this is one more layer of protection when you are running Terraform at scale. You can pin provider versions today, but that pinning is not so discrete that you are absolutely guaranteed that Terraform and automation will use the same provider day in and day out. Now, if you're running at massive scale or even minor scale, tiny scale, but that scale is critical to you, you want those runs to be repeatable. And so what the lock file does is when you run Terraform init against a configuration, it will record the provider versions in use in that configuration and the hashes that allow Terraform to verify that provider. That lock file will be committed back to VCS alongside the rest of your configuration. And when you go to run Terraform, the lock file will ensure that Terraform downloads the exact same version until you as a team, you as a single Terraform user, you as a large organization are ready to upgrade that provider version. So when you are confident in the stability of your code base, of your infrastructure as code, you don't really need to worry that a small minor upgrade that may have a bug or a new feature that's not working like you intend will kind of cause trouble for your workflow. Kind of like the Terraform the network mirrors, there is an additional command here to help you utilize this at scale. There are cases where if you are using a custom provider initialization configuration like a network mirror, your lock file may not be populated with all the versions of the provider for a given platform, so for all the platforms in use. And if that platform differs from your workstation, you may want to add platforms to the lock file, and you can do that with the Terraform providers lock command, where you can manually populate a lock file for use in your automation. It's not something everybody is going to need, but it is there, and I would recommend you checking out our upgrade guide to see, how to take advantage of these new features, where they might help you in your custom workflow. We're also bringing new conditions for variable validation. The experimental variable validation that came out late in the 0.12 lifecycle and made its way into 0.13 as production ready was, I think, one of the most surprising features for me as the product manager to see the community just explode with needs and wants around this feature. And we wanted to make sure that we were evolving it if slowly, but continuing to evolve it so that you knew it was important to us. And two of the conditions we really were interested in were all true and any true, a way to verify that a set of given an expression with many parts to it could be returned as all true, or any of those things returned as true. And we didn't get around to doing it, but Arthur Burkhardt did, submitted a PR to the Terraform repo, and with some work with the core team, got it included in 0.14. And we're really excited to kind of have done this in this way. I think it's pretty clear that contributing to Terraform can be really hard sometimes, but it's also really rewarding. We are also shipping ARM64 for Linux binaries with Terraform. So this is kind of getting to be old news. It just sort of leaked out in the 0.13 product cycle. 0.13.5, I believe, was the first official Linux ARM64 binary. We had intended to ship it with 0.14, but it made its way into our build pipeline and we just let it go. That means you can use Terraform on Amazon Graviton instances and Raspberry Pis, and I think, a number of computing platforms are heading towards ARM. So ARM64 for Linux today, and I know the questions are going to come with Apple M1 being a pretty hot topic. When are we going to get Darwin ARM64 binaries? And there's some work to be done with providers and Go itself. So, keep your ear to the ground if that's something interesting you. Probably the most exciting feature of 0.14 is kind of a surprise. And there are some more surprises to come in this area, but I want to bring you back for another webinar, so I won't let them all out today. But part of our Terraform 1.0 work and our Terraform 0.15 work is really thinking about forward compatibility. We know that working with Terraform, sometimes even between Z releases, has been painful, where you inadvertently upgrade a state file and you can't go back, you want to. And so we're beginning to relax a lot of those requirements as we make our way to 1.0. And so 0.14, Terraform 0.14 is forward compatible with 0.15 and 1.0 in terms of the state file format. Now, you may already be thinking, why not beyond that? And the truth is that we don't have any reason either way, but we are confident making this guarantee today that we don't have any plans to change the state file format with, particular features that would require it before 1.0. And I think in the coming days, weeks, you'll start to see a few other changes that are going to help organizations of all sizes get to 1.0 more efficiently, because there are a number of blockers today for users who might still be in 0.12 and 0.13 land who don't yet have a plan to upgrade, where the pain of doing so is so high. And there's a lot of fear around it because of some of the choices we've made, that we'd like to begin to reduce that fear. And this is one of the biggest changes in that direction. So again, stay tuned. There'll be lots more information coming out about state file compatibility, remote state, and some backwards compatible features in the next couple of weeks and months. I think the other not the most exciting, superlatives like that get away from me sometimes, but there is no upgrade tool with Terraform 0.14, and that's pretty exciting because I know that the upgrade to 0.13 with the required provider syntax has been a little painful for some, despite the massive value it brings and the access to all those providers. And before that, 0.12, brought with it a lot of power, but at the cost of a fair amount of work for you and your teams and your organizations. And so 0.14 has no upgrade tool because one isn't needed. If you want to begin using 0.14, you can do so today with very little change, if any, to your workflow. Again, I'd ask you to look at the upgrade guide, and it's an upgrade guide not so much in what's going to break, but rather how to take advantage of the new features in Terraform 0.14. I do need to add one little caveat here, and it's one that is probably my own doing, since I have been sort of touting this no upgrade quite heavily in the last couple of weeks. And the reality is that you do have to be on Terraform 0.13 to get to 0.14 with no upgrade. We've seen a couple of practitioners and organizations try to jump from 0.12 to 0.14 without completing the upgrade to the required provider syntax and the changes that involves. And there be dragons there if you choose that route. So yeah, check out the upgrade guide. If you're on 0.13, the path to 14 is very, very easy. And I'm really excited actually to turn this over now to Kyle to show you some of what I've been talking about. So I am going to stop sharing my screen and hand it over to him. Thanks, everyone.
Sweet. Fantastic. Thank you very much for that, Petros. Let me start my screen share here. It'll take just a second to kick in. Let me know as soon as you see a Visual Studio Code environment. Petros or Kitty, can you see that yet?
I can see your code.
Sweet. Okay. Good deal. Okay, so let's talk about some of these improvements that Petros has been talking about. One of the most impactful things, I think, in terms of my usage of Terraform is around concise diff. Really being able to isolate down to exactly what I need to know about what's about to change within my infrastructure that's being out to Azure. If you've seen any of the other videos that Petros and I have done, we've used VMware, we've used AWS, we've used all kinds of providers. So concise diff is not limited to any of those resources. So here's our configuration here. We've a couple of things that I want to call out here. We're using a remote backend, so we're sending our state file off to Terraform Cloud in my free account that I have out there to maintain state files. We are pinning our Azure RM provider to be version 2.35. That'll be important when we get to the lock file. And then down here towards the bottom, we have the actual virtual machine configuration itself. Now, what we have here is an instance where I've deployed this virtual machine, but it only has one network NIC configured for it. So I need to configure one more NIC. So let me just really quickly add that into my Terraform code here. And this one happens to just be VM backup. We can see some IntelliSense working through our Terraform extension. Big shout out to the folks that have been working on that. So we've now saved our code. Let's jump over to our terminal session here. Let me show you first and foremost that we are using Terraform version 13 still, 0.13. We have a nice little visual here telling us that our Terraform is out of date, but nonetheless, let's move on with our demo here. So we're going to do a Terraform plan just to see what's going to happen, what the impact is for that update to the NIC for our virtual machine. So we're going to do a quick refresh against some of those resources that have already been provisioned out in Azure. And then we see this list of things that comprise our virtual machine resource. You see that we have one thing that we need to change, and then we have a lot of information. A lot of information just to get to this one point right here where it's saying that our network interface IDs we have a resource that's being added. Okay, so let's take a look how this now appears in our Terraform 0.14 release. So let me show you first here that we are using 0.14 on the right side of our terminal screen here. Let me jump over to where this repository is. And we're going to need to do a Terraform init, refresh, let it know that we're changing up our versions of Terraform here. And let me clear that out again, and then we can do our Terraform plan. Now we're going to be able to see side by side what the two differences are between 0.13 and 0.14. So again, we see that refresh of our resources, and then we get down here to our resource. So we can see that we have our Azure RM virtual machine that's being updated. We can see that our network interface IDs are changing right there. In fact, we can scroll our right side there. And then importantly, what's happening is that we're hiding the things that are not being impacted. So we can see that we have 16 different attributes that have been hidden because they're not changing. There are a couple different blocks that are being hidden because also those are not changing. Those are unimportant to the way that we are processing our configuration, as it were. Now, as Petros mentioned earlier, if this is not the desired impact that you want to see from your Terraform binary, you can disable this and turn it off. So keep that in mind. All right, let me close out our 0.13 and just focus on 0.14. The next thing that we kind of want to look at here is our sensitive variables. So switching back to our configuration here, we're going to jump to a different branch of this repository, or maybe not. Let me discard that change real quick. Sorry about that. All right, so here we're on our sensitive variables branch that I've updated a couple different pieces of our variables to reflect that we would like them to be sensitive in nature. So here we have our storage type has been updated to be sensitive. We don't want that output being shown to our output screen. And the same thing for our admin username. We want to take that and make sure that it's hidden so that it can't be logged by any of our logging programs. It can't be sent off to anything that people who might not have access to it should not continue to not have access to it. All right, so if we go back to our configuration here, we'll do another Terraform plan. Then this time we should see a couple updates to not only our network interface IDs, but as well to those sensitive values. So here we have our storage account type. That was one of our variables that we made a sensitive variable. So it hides that output from being displayed to our local session here. We have done the exact same thing for our admin username as well. So both of those are going to be hidden. Those aren't going to be output. But I will throw out the caveat that they will still be maintained in the state file. Now, one of the other things that Petros kind of touched on there is around some of the providers that also have the ability to build in sensitivity. So I'm going to go ahead and add sensitivity to our admin password and just quickly rerun this just to show you that the Azure provider is actually already marking that as sensitive within the configuration itself. So even if we mark it as sensitive, it's not going to impact that at all. It's going to maintain. Notice the difference here. The password is a sensitive value, whereas our admin username as well as our storage policy there are both marked as sensitive. So this is a really cool use case where the provider is kind of looking out for us and trying to maintain that security around our configurations. Okay, let's move on to another look here at some variable validation. So let's jump to taking a look at using variable validation and applying this to our location. So we're deploying these items to Azure. However, we only want our users or our consumers, our deployers, to be able to create infrastructure as part of US East. So either, in this case, US East or US East 2. So we're using one of the new conditions that are available with Terraform 0.14 called AnyTrue. And in this case, we're going to supply it a list and tell it we would like our location to exist as one of those items. And so if any of those checks are going to be true, it's going to return true, and then we're good to roll forward with our configuration. So we're going to go ahead and do another plan. However, we're going to do an update. We're going to provide, actually, here, let me clear this out. Get it to the top so you don't have to stare at the bottom of my screen. So we're doing a Terraform plan. We're going to do a var So that means that we're inputting a manual variable. We're going to do location equals, let's do West US. So running our plan, we're going to hit that Terraform or variable validation through Terraform immediately without doing any sort of planning or run operations itself. And we're going to get a nice little output that says, hey, these resources should reside in one of the East US locations. So kind of nice way to kind of sanitize the input of our variables there. Then we have another one that we can make use of that is all true. So if we scroll down here to our VM size, in this case, we are going to be looking at our validation code, and we would like to match our input for that variable to several different conditions that we would like to be true. So in this case, we're going to use some regex to say that we would like the input to begin with standard. And then we're going to use another expression here through regex that we would like it to end with either a 0 or a 4 so that we can kind of maintain the size of this virtual machine that we deploy within Azure to maintain that size of standard 0 through standard 4. That helps to maintain cost and some consistency throughout our environment. So jumping back to our Terraform code here, let's do another plan. We're going to do a var of, let's say, VM size. Let's do just a standard A7. It's going to check our variable validation. It's going to look and see, standard, that's applicable. A7, that is not. It needs to be between 0 and 4. So if we update our variable input here and tell it that we would like this to be a standard of A4, run this again. And while this is running, none of this is dependent upon the Azure provider. This is going to work across the board. And shout out to the folks that created the issues for this, because this is definitely something that's incredibly useful. So as we can see here, we have our input here causing our update of our size to go from A0 to A4. So in this case, updating that variable worked and matched both of our regular expressions there to go through and approve. All right, so the next big thing that I want to take a look at is that lock file. I saw some of the questions that were coming in about that, so there seems to be, I want to talk about that and show you exactly really how that works. So let's jump our branch over back to main. Clear this out, and then we're going to go ahead and lock this, our configuration here. So we'll do a Terraform providers and lock. So we're saying that we only want this Terraform configuration in the way that it's being deployed right now to use that Azure RM provider that's 2.35. So we can verify and kind of check out what's being called in that file through that, easily cat that out. So here we can see that our version there is 2.35. We can see that even though, I skipped ahead a little bit, I'll show you that. But one of the things that's happened here is when I switched to that main branch, it actually updated our Azure provider within the required providers block to say that we're looking for anything that's Azure RM that's 2.0.0 and above. So in this case, because we've already been using 2.3.5, it locked in on that version because that's what we've been using. That's what it knows as our good instance there, and maintains that. So just to verify here, by scrolling up, we can see that our Azure providers, Azure RM, is now looking for above, anything that's equal to or above 2.0. So what happens when we're ready to update? Let's do another with Terraform initialization. Now that we have that our required provider input has been updated. But see, we're still using 235. So it's still saying that we have that lock file. It's there. That's what we're going to maintain as part of this. Now, one of the things that we can do to kind of help override that is we can now do a Terraform init and then call out the upgrade. What's going to happen there is now it's going to reach out. We can see that our new version, our required provider version there has been updated to be looking for anything that's above 2.0. So now we can see that we are, instead of using 2.35, we're using 2.39. And again, we can kind of check out our lock file here to show exactly what's happening there. Now that our constraint is still being anything that's above 2.0, however, our version is going to be pinned to that 2.39, so that even if Azure releases a new version of this provider, it's not going to surprise us. So really cool functionality that's available there. So with that, let me jump back to our presentation here, because that was the demonstrations that we have for you. So let's talk some additional resources, some of the things that Petros has gone over, some of the things such as the upgrade guide. This is going to be really important because even though there's no breaking changes, there's no real updates as far as that, but there are new features that are available as part of the upgrade guide. And of course, I do want to continue to stress the caveat that you do have to be on 0.13 in order to go to 0.14. Otherwise, you have the possibility of running into some headaches. We've also done a lot of work around the Learn guides. So there's the Learn platform from HashiCorp. Out there, there are a ton of great resources that kind of walk you through, guide you through the usage of some of these brand new features that have been released as part of 0.14. And then lastly, we have a great blog series that's been going on for all of these new updates to 0.14 that are out there on the HashiCorp blog. I'll share those in the comments here shortly. And then, of course, 0.14 is now available. And as per my terminal session there earlier, it's even been already updated to 0.14.1. So with that, let's open it up to do some Q&A if we have any that still need to be addressed.
We have been getting lots of amazing questions, Kyle. Lots of them.
Fantastic.
So I've got a few that I wrote down while you were doing your demo. I think before I get to the questions, I think there are a couple open ones, which are, can we make your files from the demo or something like that available after the fact, Kyle?
Yeah, sure. I can share it out through GitHub.
Cool.
Because then you'll have access to the different branches as well, so you can kind of see exactly what I was doing as I walk through the demo there.
Cool. All right, so we got one from Hugh saying, if you expressly make an output from a sensitive value, will it still be obscured? And so this is one of those cases where, I wish the Q&A was interactive so I could ask some qualifying questions. But I think what's being asked here is, if you have a sensitive input variable that you pass to an output in the root module, the place where you would expect Terraform to spit out some values to the console at the end of a plan or apply. The reality with sensitive values, or the behavior currently, is that output, if it is not marked as sensitive, will actually cause an error. Again, we're erring on the side of protecting those values from accidental egress. And so this was actually one of the reasons why the provider-specific sensitive attributes were not made as a default, on by default feature in 0.14, because module authors may be using providers where an attribute or an argument is sensitive, passing it to an output and accidentally exposing it somehow, or at least not being completely aware of the ergonomics of the new sensitive behavior. And we did not want anybody's existing configuration to just straight up break. But with marking input variable values as sensitive, because that's a feature you need to adopt, we also want practitioners to be ensuring that the matching output, if that is consumed somewhere, would also be marked sensitive. So if you don't do that, if there's a sensitive value that hits an output, so a value anywhere in the plan that is marked sensitive, whether that's what we're doing today or some future state of Terraform, right now that output will error unless it too is matched up with sensitive equals true attribute attached to it to prevent the display. I think that this is a really good question about what are the ergonomics of Terraform here. And the truth is that this first foray into sensitive values, and I have a number of questions here that I'll answer as a follow-on to this, really is the result of us discovering that a lot of what users want in cases is pretty bespoke. And so when we make a decision about what we're going to do here, there is a moment, and that is the 0.14 product, release cycle, where we will be evaluating this behavior for further optimization and changes, because the ergonomics are not always perfectly clear, and sometimes it takes a lot of soak time before we're confident about a particular behavior. So some follow-on questions from that, and I don't have the names of everybody who are contributing these because I was writing them quickly, was encrypting the state file wholesale, something we hear a lot. And I think there's a sort of similar but perhaps orthogonal question, which is tokenization of values. And so we're definitely considering both of those things, but we haven't been able to come to a consensus on, what the expression of those was, although it seems very simple that Terraform should just give it a password and protect it. But there is a lot of complexity in how that gets automated, what you do with it, where we have our focus firmly on getting Terraform to 1.0 and then coming back to these. So the near-term answer is sadly no. It's not on our roadmap right now to encrypt the state file wholesale. We definitely understand the value that it would bring, but there are a lot of tools that can help do that today. And so keep screaming at us. I swear that it is not screaming into the void. All right, I said there were some surprises related to state file compatibility. And there was a question there about the brittleness of Terraform state file and its sort of the lack of clarity on its compatibility between, point releases and then major versions, even though today those major versions are 0. something. Starting this week, there will be a set of releases made. Actually, let me get to the question first. Will it be possible to reference remote state from Terraform 0.11? And the answer is, I think the question was asking forward remote state, and I think the answer is no. So let me clarify for everyone out there. Terraform today is sort of backward compatible with remote state, but not forward compatible with remote state. 0.14, as I've mentioned, that the state file compatibility is both local and remote. So there's nothing to do there. Whether the local state is being used or a remote state data source, it's forward compatible to 1.0. The surprise that I was hoping to kind of keep under wraps, but I'm just going to share it, is that tomorrow we'll be releasing a new 0.13 release and very, very exceptionally, a new 0.12 release, both of which will have remote state forward compatibility all the way to 1.0. And so while we are not giving it the same sort of local state compatibility, because we have changed the state file a little bit between those two versions in 0.14, 15, and 1.0, those versions will be able to connect to remote workspaces if you're using Terraform Cloud or, remote state stored in some kind of bucket or cloud object storage, blob storage, whatever you're using. And be able to allow you to upgrade collections of your Terraform code without having to do it all at once. So hopefully that is really exciting. It's really exciting to us to bring these small features, all of which have come out of our 0.15 development, back into more of Terraform to help make getting to 1.0 easy for you. Kyle, did you have any questions you saw that you wanted to answer?
Unfortunately, I cannot see the questions at the moment with my screen shared. So
I'll keep going then. I've got time, so if you don't mind. So we have a question here about, can you have multiple validation blocks given one variable definition? And the answer is yes. While the conditional variable validation is limited to the scope of the given variable, you can give it multiple conditions. So multiple assertions that you would like to validate it against. No problem whatsoever. Matt asked, can we get a better string contains function? So I think Matt's asking, can we have a easy drop in, does this string contain, some other string or some value instead of having to use regex? And that's a pretty good feature request. I wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't already on our backlog. And if anyone out there is interested in helping us build it, I think we'd certainly take a PR for something like that. I am looking at my list here. Oh, Sam asked us if the possibility exists that the state file will contain private keys, some sensitive values. And I think the answer, if I was unclear before, is yes. If you're using something like a TLS provider that you might use to generate a certificate or some sort of encrypted string of some sort, that will be in your state file, and your state file becomes a very valuable asset that you do have to go to lengths to protect. Some of the providers are generating very, very sensitive data, and short of egressing that into some other system like Vault, which we can't yet do today, but I imagine there's some future where that is the case. You have to take care with your state file. I'm looking over here. Oh, flags for concise diff. So there were a couple of questions around turning on and off concise diff. One of the most challenging things we have to do as a Terraform team is try to make a decision that meets the bulk of our use cases. And it's one we don't make lightly. I know sometimes it probably feels that way when we make a decision that goes against your workflow or that kind of negatively affects you. First of all, we want to hear about it. Every voice helps inform the decisions we make. But with concise diff in particular, this was born out of a discussion where Terraform was kind of okay in 0.11, got very, very verbose in 0.12, and that made it hard at scale to make actionable decisions. And so we're hoping that the decisions we make, the design decisions with what we're showing you, are the best for most users. And again, if you need the entire plan, short of some defect in concise diff, which isn't showing you something that's changing, our hope is that, again, the converting the plan to a JSON output is beneficial for those users that need something more complete, but we really don't want to add to the surface area of Terraform where we're turning on and turning off the UI diff. We are open to feedback though, and that is why it's an on by default experiment here. If in 0.14 it is really, really bothering you, you can disable it for your runs and turn off the experimental behavior with an environment variable. I am looking through some other questions here. Oh, here's a good one. Where does the provider version log file persist? Now, Kyle, you may have demoed this, but it is a new feature, so I'm just going to reiterate where it sits. It will sit in the root, in sort of alongside the files in Terraform's root module as a terraform.lock.hcl file. And so it'll be hidden from, a regular directory listing, but it is there as a hidden file that you should be committing to your version control system for use in automation. And yeah, I think there are a ton of other questions that I think we are not going to be able to get to completely, in part because no one wants to watch me look through the questions and try to answer them. There are two things I am going to commit to do. The first is I'm going to get a copy of these questions and I am going to begin answering them on Twitter. So, if you have a question here that you desperately want an answer to, please ask it to me. I'm in our community forums. I know Kyle and I are both on Twitter. We're really accessible and we are not trying to shirk your hard questions in any way, shape, or form. The other thing that is happening for those of you who are around who want a little more kind of concerted question and answer time is that myself and a Terraform core engineer will be joining our developer advocates on Thursday live on YouTube to ask, to talk more about 0.14, talk a little bit more about some of the nuances and the intricacies. So yeah, join us there if we didn't get to you today and you've got a burning one. So that's what I've got.
Hi, sorry. So just wanted to say thank you to everybody for joining us for today. And also thank you to Petros and Kyle for the awesome webinar and walkthrough. Feel free to reach out to us at discuss.hashicorp.com if you have any more questions about the Terraform release. And also, too, we will be sending out a follow-up email for this webinar. It may be about 2 to 3 days post-processing, which will include access to the recorded version. And you can also find it on YouTube. So thank you, everyone, for joining, and have an awesome day.